Well, joining us now is Michael Fabricant, the Conservative MP for Lichfield, who's a former whip himself and knows a thing or two about whipping. Let's take a look.
Is whipping all about discipline? That's not allowed anymore.
Oh, Michael, we just had to play that clip. I know that's from a YouTube video you made explaining what whipping is all about quite a few years ago. But shall we start this conversation off now with what some people have been reporting are pretty unusual tactics from the whips, suggesting that money is being withheld from MPs, that maybe stories, embarrassing stories, might be being planted in papers for MPs that are opposing the Prime Minister. Does that ring true to you?
No, it doesn't. And in fact, Christian Wakeford was saying that, you know, he was threatened that he wouldn't get a school if he voted a particular way. It turns out that he did vote a particular way, the way the whips didn't want, but he still got his school. So it really makes a mockery of all that. I think the thing is with the whips is that we like to sort of be fairly secretive in our activities. And some of your older viewers may remember that wonderful BBC television production, the original English version of House of Cards, the one that the American version copied. Wasn't as good, the American version, in my opinion. But all that sinister, all that behind the scenes, black books and everything, is really all a bit of a fantasy, especially in today where virtually everything can be found on Google. But the whip's office is there, whether it's a Conservative whip's office, whether it's a Labour or Lib Dem or any other SNP or whatever party whip's office, to try and make sure that people all vote the same way, because if you don't, you wouldn't get any legislation through and there'll be anarchy. But
So
people
what
do rebel.
tactics did
I've
you...
rebelled.
When you were in the whip's office, Michael Fabricant, what tactics would you use to try and get MPs to vote the way you wanted them to?
Well, first of all, I would ask them, why are you not supporting the government in this bit of legislation? And if they gave us this government minister, so that the minister can explain why he thinks the MP is wrong, or in some circumstances, actually put down a government amendment to actually change the legislation to meet the point that the MP is making. That's one way of doing it. That's the best way of doing it. An alternative way is to sort of say, well, you know, you're letting the side down, put a little bit of moral pressure. But all this, as I said earlier, black book nonsense, blackmailing, attacking people, those days are long gone. I mean, I will tell you,
it is true, though, that MPs who are more rebellious are less likely to be promoted. There's incentives of jobs, of trinkets dangled in front of MPs who are more loyal, and sort of the being cast out for those that are less loyal. And of course, one of the previous chief whips of the Conservative Party kept a tarantula on his desk. That's a little intimidating, isn't it?
Well, I think that was a bit of a joke. In fact, he was called Cronus. It was Gavin Williamson, who's a pal of mine, who does have this pet tarantula called Cronus, and I did stroke it. So it wasn't that bad. No, I think that was just for show, really. And the current chief whip, Mark Spencer, I always call him Marksman Spencer, Mark Spencer, the present chief whip, has on his wall, because he's a farmer, one of those clipper things that you use for castrating bulls, because he's a cow farmer. But I've had it on very good assurance that he's never used it. No, it's all part of the show that whip try and present in order to get some discipline. But the idea of blackmail and all the rest of it is just ridiculous, frankly.
Do you think there's any truth to this suggestion of a slightly harsher set of tactics being undertaken by the shadow whipping operation that seems to have cropped up since the weekend? A team of people who aren't in the whip's office, but who are loyal and close to Boris Johnson, who've been doing the ring rounds on his behalf. Not part of the formal whips, but sort of almost informal whipping. Might they be a little bit harsher than the formal structure?
Well, as I understand it, it's more an intelligence gathering operation. It's to find out how people feel. If they support Boris now, will they continue to support Boris? If they don't support Boris, why don't you support Boris? So, as I say, it's more of an intelligence gathering operation. Let's put it this way, any shadow, or I'm not quite sure what word we can call it, whipping operation, wouldn't have any credibility at all about having power to give people those jobs that you were talking about earlier, Tom.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave that conversation there. We're running a little short on time, but Michael Fabricant, as always, thank you for departing your knowledge and being in such good spirits with that video that we showed at the start of this interview. Always good fun to see. Michael,
That was Mark
you.
Dolan, by the way. I don't know whether you know, the guy I was whacking was your very own Mark Dolan, who's an old friend
Well,
of mine.
it's worth typing into Google Michael Fabricant Whips office and finding that video. It's a great fun watch. Michael, thank you for joining us.